Hello everyone. Please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our stories.
Quietly amongst the emerald slopes of tea, each undulating hill painted in the tranquil green of summer. In this gentle season, the sun's warmth arrived not as a harsh blaze, but as a muted glow, tender as a silk scarf draped over the shoulders of the earth. Here, the red clay roads wound lazily between areca palms and banana gardens, weaving through bamboo groves where the constant playful wind flirted with branches from first light until the world faded to dusk. Evenings, when they settled in, seemed to put the entire village in a gentle trance. The usual melody of children's laughter, the hum of women chatting over fences, the distant yet familiar bark of a dog, all fell away, replaced by the hush of moonlight pressing softly on every roof tile, every garden stone, every mirrored pond. Tonight, a full moon draped the village in its pale radiance, tracing all it touched with the softest silver. The moonlight was not cold, nor was it brittle. Rather, it seemed to mingle with the faintest breeze, filling the world with gentleness and expectancy. The air was alive with the crisp chorus of crickets, their steady song weaving an endless lullaby that made even the old bamboo fence posts sway sleepily. Under this soothing canopy, every house appeared to doze, its windows dim, its doors settled into restful silence. But in a small room at the tail end of a winding alley, one soul defied the universal sleep. Lynn, not quite a little girl and not yet a young woman, rested her chin on her folded arm by the open window as she gazed out. She watched as the moonlight painted everything familiar with new colors. Her view stretched beyond the fallow mango tree, the mossy water jar, and the uneven yardstones softened by long grass. Lynn's breathing was as silent as the midnight air. Her sleeplessness was not born of discomfort. No sticky heat plagued her skin, and the mosquitoes had not found her tonight. Instead, her wakefulness was gentle and subtle, a part of the air itself. Something unspoken lingered just at the edges of perception, fragile as a thread of silk. There was a magic in the air, Lynn sensed. The moon was telling secrets, sharing its wisdom only with those awake enough to listen. Quietly, drawn by a force she could not name, Lynn rose. She tiptoed across the bamboo mat, each movement practiced in stealth so as not to rouse the house. With care, she eased open the battered wooden door. The hinges offered the faintest protest, a sleepy, familiar creak. Outside, cool grass greeted her feet, its blades soft and damp with the memory of recent rain. A chill tickled her toes, but rather than shrink, Lynn stretched her arms, letting the night's embrace settle around her shoulders. Above, the moon hung proud and round, luminous, unblinking, serene. Its light was like no other, not harsh or glaring, but deep, a kind of glow that slipped beneath skin and bone and nestled inside the heart. It was the color of old silk handkerchiefs and the breath of mothers as they soothed children to sleep. Under this moon, shadows lost their menace, growing long but gentle, stretched across grass and garden wall alike. The mango tree, a familiar sentinel, stood tall in its ancient spot. Its trunk was pockmarked, its limbs gnarled with age, but tonight, every leaf quivered delicately with the breeze, as if the tree itself remembered other moonlit nights when tales were told beneath its boughs. Lynn cast her thoughts backwards, to evenings curled up in her grandmother's lap, cocooned in fairy stories that spiraled up into the velvet sky, a time when safety felt like the weight of loving arms. Beneath this sky with stars like drops of dew, each a story waiting to be collected, Lynn felt suspended, both tiny and infinite. Alone yet entirely connected to the rolling hills, the soft earth, the distant patient hush of the mountains. She breathed in, and every note of summer night entered her. The sharp green of mown grass, the raw scent of earth, a drift of jasmine from a bush blooming bravely by the fence. It was a scent like hope, soft, unexpected, and persistent. Through the peace, a fragile note slipped, a faint chime from deep in the village. Delicate, trembling, as if someone had plucked a silver wire. The sound piqued Lynn's curiosity, winding itself around her heart and stirring something unnamed in her chest. She turned toward it, eyes searching the shadows beyond the garden gate. For a breathless instant, she fancied she saw a white shape gliding beyond the thickening trees, half real and half imagined. Her heart fluttered, Not out of fear, but from the thrill of discovery, the delicious pull that happens at the turning of a story's page. The world seemed suddenly charged with possibility. There was enchantment here, a promise folded into the creases of the moonlit night. Without thinking, Lynn drifted forward, carried by the tug of wonder. Her bare feet padded along the red dirt path, each step illuminated by the silver trail cast by the moon. The grass parted softly at her passing, the hush of the village folded behind her like a closing book. She followed the whisper of the chimes, the murmurs of wind through bamboo, the ache of memories she didn't know she held. Tonight, beneath the first summer moonlight, Lynn became part of something larger. A tapestry of old stories, of awakening spirits, of gentle mysteries waiting among the tea hills. The boundaries between past and present, between her longing and reality, seemed to dissolve in the luminous air. As she wandered, question, hope, and promise entwined, she understood that some nights are meant for journeys, and that sometimes the moon sings only for those brave enough to listen. Beneath that unwavering moon, the village slept on, but Lynn stepped forward, open to the secrets of summer, knowing, without needing to know why, that she would not be the same come morning. The narrow path at the edge of the village felt almost like an old memory summoned into being by the quiet hush of midnight. Lynn's footsteps threaded softly along the earthen track, a rhythmic cadence that seemed to echo the invisible tune filling the night. Each breath she drew was laced with the earthy perfume of bamboo groves, their slender stalks bathed in moonlight and shuddering with the faint, persistent wind. Her fingertips brushed against her damp collar. Dew gathered there, chilling her skin and making the boundary between night and wakefulness dissolve a little more. She had ventured farther from home than usual, drawn by something that transcended curiosity, a pull as silent and sure as the tide's retreat. And as she walked, the music she alone could hear braided itself with the whispering leaves, the sound barely distinguishable from the ghostly murmur that villagers claimed to hear after sunset. In these woods, stories swirled like mist, but Lynn, unlike others, felt soothed by them. Tonight the wind chimes sang again. The sound was clearer than she remembered, as if the night had grown silent just to make space for that delicate melody, a gentle, ringing call that seemed meant for her alone. It guided her eyes and her feet to the ancient fig tree, the quiet sentry at the village's limit, its gnarled trunk and tangled branches sheltering secrets as old as the land itself. Children scurried down these paths during daylight, quick to cross themselves before daring to glance at that tree. "Ghosts live there," they whispered, the ghost of a woman who vanished in the dark. Yet here and now, Lynn was unafraid. To her, the fig's broad shade was a sanctuary, not a place of hauntings but of resting histories. The great tree loomed into view, its silhouette stark and powerful against the milky wash of the moon. Beneath its boughs, a figure stood, motionless, a streak of white set against the mottled earth. Every instinct told Lynn to pause, curiosity wrestling with caution until her heart beat high in her chest. The stranger's eye gleamed in the moonlight, ethereal and smooth, and her long hair pooled like silver dusk down her back. Still, she uttered no sound, her presence as serene as the coolest breeze. Lynn called out. Her voice felt small, but the night carried it softly. "Who are you?" Slowly, so slowly it was as if time itself had grown heavy. The stranger turned. Her movements appeared weightless, every gesture choreographed with infinite care, each moment of turning ageless and deliberate. The woman's face was revealed at last, luminous and tranquil, her eyes as deep and distant as the night's farthest stars. There was nothing familiar about her, yet Lynn trembled with the instinctive certainty that she had seen her somewhere long ago and far away. A half-remembered lullaby, a presence glimpsed in dreams. A smile curved onto the stranger's lips, tender and mysterious. Her voice, when it came, was like water over stone, soft and endlessly patient. The full moon night is when the moon listens to forgotten things. You heard it calling, right? Lynn's answer rose shyly from her chest, more an instinct than a reasoned reply. She had no explanation for her arrival. The gravity of the words settled in her heart, weaving a gentle commotion in places she'd kept silent for years. Then the woman breathed another question, her head tilted like one pondering the shape of an old story. Do you know why the wind tonight doesn't carry the sound of dogs barking or the sound of people calling each other? Lynn glanced around, realizing with a quiet start that yes, the world was absent of all the noises that had once made the village feel inhabited, the everyday rattle of life, now stilled. The woman's voice continued, carrying an assurance that filled the hush. Because all sounds are giving way to old things. Tonight, the past is allowed to return. These words did not frighten Lynn. Instead, they soothed her as surely as a gentle hand smoothing a fevered brow. She felt as though knots she hadn't known were knotted had begun to unravel inside her, the pressure ebbing with every syllable offered to her beneath the fig's ancient arms. And then, softly, the stranger went on. Under this tree, many years ago, there was a person who waited for a letter that never came. There was a person who forgot his name in the memories of others. And there was a child who dreamed of returning to this place, just to hear the wind chimes ringing in the moonlight. As she spoke, the wind lifted once again. The chimes trembled with a clear, longing note that seemed to echo both joy and grief in equal measure. Lynn found herself stepping closer, her presence drawn to the gravity of the tale. Her eyes shimmered with unspilled tears, moved by the sorrow and yearning embedded in the night air. I feel like I've been here before, but I don't remember why. Without warning, the woman reached out with a hand as weightless as mist, fingertips brushing her own heart before pressing softly against Lynn's forehead. It was a gentle benediction, a gesture heavy with meaning beyond words, because the soul's memories don't need a reason. As long as you believe, you will remember. And when you remember, you will understand why you can't sleep tonight. A warmth unfurled inside Lynn, tender as childhood but boundless as the sky. The memory was not of a single night or face, but of belonging. Of roots sunk deep into a past that lingered all around her, waiting to be remembered under the gaze of the moon. The woman's eyes lingered on Lynn, kind and almost sorrowful. She retreated, the distance growing with each floating step, until the shimmer of her form blurred into the fog and the folds of moonlight. No sound, no goodbye, only the knowledge of her presence lingering like a softly ringing bell. Lynn stood under the tree, letting the echoes settle into her heart, knowing something crucial and powerful had been stirred within. The chimes swayed gently above, and the moon traced silver shadows around her, as if marking the spot where past and present had embraced. In the quiet, Lynn closed her eyes and listened, letting the story of the tree and the stranger plant itself deep in her soul, roots reaching silently, searching for the sun. Under the ancient canopy of the banyan tree, Lynn stood suspended in a world between memory and present, wrapped in a hush so deep that the air itself seemed to listen. The moon's gentle radiance spread across the land, draping everything with a feather-light shroud of silver. It softened the edges of the earth and brought the colors of night into luminous relief. The ghostly white of blooms half hidden in shadow, the rich green of wet leaves, the textured gray of the gnarled roots coiling beneath her feet. Even the silence felt illuminated, luminous with things unsaid. In that hush, Lynn's senses grew sharper, aware of each small thing. The roughness of bark under her fingers, the distant scent of earth after a day's rain, the faint pitter of her own heartbeat in her chest. She tilted her head and let herself look up, straight into the heart of the moon. Its pale glow seemed stronger than she ever remembered, as if time had thinned the sky to let its hidden stories pour through. She stood transfixed. The moon's surface was not smooth, but traced with scars and ridges. Memory lines, perhaps, written across centuries. In its cool, silent presence, Lynn felt herself part of something immense and ancient. She was small, but not alone. Her eyes traced the patterns on the moon, and stories seemed to drift to her across the soft space between earth and sky. No words echoed in the air, but something vibrant flowed into her thoughts. Images melting and blending with remembered sounds, ephemeral feelings, and the lost voices of her past. Then, as if guided by unseen hands, her mind drifted back across years, back to a small house filled with the aroma of oil lamps, the cozy crackle of a bamboo bed under her, the comforting shape of her grandmother's form outlined in the warm lamplight. She was a child again, Just 6, her legs curled beneath her as she leaned in to listen. Her grandmother's voice filled the room, a slow and thoughtful murmur that rose and fell like the wind along the garden fence. Each word painted a new world. Mermaids who whispered secrets beneath the waves, a fisherman's boy discovering a pearl bright enough to rival the stars, and a little girl who plucked the moon from the sky and carried its glow in her pocket. These tales felt real and immediate, as though the magic in them hovered just on the edge of reach. Between stories, her grandmother would pause, her gaze finding Lynn in the half-light. "You know, the moon doesn't just light the way," she would say, her voice tinged with a wisdom that seemed as old as the hills. "It also keeps forgotten dreams." That idea lingered in Lynn's memory like a melody, half-remembered, unspeakably comforting. Her mind's eye shifted again, and another memory rose to meet her. An autumn afternoon, the golden hush of sun slanting across the yard, the air thick with the crisp promise of change. There was Lynn, clutching a lantern fashioned from a repurposed milk can decorated with careful, loving hands. The wind, sudden and impish, whipped across the yard and snuffed out the tiny flame. The darkness was abrupt, and with it came Lynn's tears, hot, stinging, quick to fall. But then her grandmother was there, arms warm and strong and steady, drawing Lynn close and cradling her small face in the folds of a faded brown dress. She brushed away the tears, once, twice, with gentle fingers, her voice a quiet promise. "It's okay, my child. There's always another fire waiting for us to rekindle. You just have to be patient." The assurance settled into Lynn's bones that day and waited there, quietly, for her to remember. Now, standing beneath the ancient banyan, Lynn blinked back to the present, the moonlight soft but relentless. The fig tree rose before her, the world quiet but not quite empty. She pressed a trembling hand to her heart, suddenly aware of the loss that had colored the last 3 years. A gentle erosion she had hidden from herself, locked behind the door of memory. Grief old and deep pressed close. Her grandmother had departed under a sky like this, moon-washed and silent. Lynn had not been there to say goodbye, trapped too many miles and too many moments away. The guilt and pain had been tucked into the farthest corner of her heart, unopened, buried. But now, under the gaze of the moon, all the old sorrow and yearning rose, first as a tightness in her chest, then as tears falling fast and silent. This time she did not turn away. She allowed the tears to come, let them fall to nourish the waiting earth at her feet. These were not bitter tears, but bittersweet. They fell in memory of laughter and stories, for words left unsaid, for the warmth of a hug on a cool night, for the part of herself that had quietly mourned and quietly hoped all this time. And within this tide of feeling, Lynn heard, not in the world outside her, but rising gently from within, the echo of a presence, a voice without sound but rich with meaning. "I haven't forgotten. I'm just not ready to remember." The words moved through her not as commands, but as a tender excuse, an invitation to healing. Their cadence matched her grandmother's, loving, wise, and patient, never hurried or insistent. Love flowed through her, filling the cracks left by absence. Once more, Lynn looked up at the moon. It no longer felt unreachable or cold. It was closer now, its light a gentle touch on her skin, a bridge to what she had lost and what she still carried. In that moment, it became not just a celestial body, but a mirror, one that reflected her memories, her joys, her grief. The moon was a gentle hand that reached back across time and held the child she had once been. She took a slow breath, her heart fluttering like the chime that hung now still above her head. With the quiet certainty of someone keeping a promise, she whispered, "I still remember. I'm still here." Her words blended with the night, threading through the silence, reaching both to the roots below and the stars above. And as if in response, a gentle breeze stirred, brushing against her cheek with familiar tenderness. The chimes awakened and sang a soft reply, notes tumbling through the night air as if in blessing. Lynn smiled, her spirit lighter. Peace, both old and new, settled softly inside her, as gentle and as luminous as the moonlight itself. The first whispers of morning crept gently across the land, a gradual unveiling as darkness relinquished its hold to the quiet radiance of dawn. Above, stars winked out one by one, disappearing behind clouds transformed into pale ribbons stretching across a blushing sky. The moon, once the sovereign queen of night, softened her gaze and faded quietly, almost shyly, as the horizon blushed with hope. Mist hovered, silvery and uncertain, tangled in the arms of ancient trees. But beneath that hazy veil, a promise was stirring, a subtle shift in the air, a pause, and then an awakening rhythm, life unfolding silently but surely with the coming light. By the prideful old banyan, Lynn lingered, caught between night sadness and something unbearably light. Her hair clung to her cheeks, damp with dew, a faint chill dressing her skin. Yet within, she felt no cold, no fatigue. The heaviness of the night, the ache, the untold grief, had slipped from her, vanishing like mist in the touch of sunlight. It was as though an invisible string tying her to old sorrows had broken at last, and she was free. It was not absence she felt, but relief, a hush at her center, quiet strength, forgiveness, release. She walked for home as the birds began to stir, their calls tentative at first, swelling by degrees into joyous song. The path was one her feet knew well. Bamboo arched along each side, stately gates saluting her return. Their slender leaves trembled as she brushed past, making a music soft as breath. A tender farewell reprising the old night as it receded. The air itself seemed newly woven, a comforting arm wrapped about her. The song of the wind murmured in her ear, a lullaby for the heart newly woken from the long, crowded dream of memory. In the first trembling light, Lynn paused by the mango tree at her doorstep. Its trunks and roots, knotted with age, seemed wiser than mere wood and bark, deeper than soil's embrace. She pressed her hand to the cool, rough skin of the tree, feeling the pulse of life within, the slow, patient strength that reminds the living to endure. The scent of old grapefruit blossoms drifted past, a sweetness faint and persistent, woven into the breeze, a memory caught in the present. Lynn's touch was gentle, a gesture reaching backward into childhood, one practiced under her grandmother's quiet instruction. At last, this gesture, this connection, felt instinctive, not a routine or a ritual, but a restoration of belonging. She was not alone. She was of this house, of these trees, of this wind and this dawn. She was home. Stepping softly, she crossed the yard, pausing to absorb the wet traces of dew beneath her bare feet. Everything felt cleaner, more itself. At the threshold, she paused briefly, savoring the moment before she pulled the old wooden door closed on the night that was fading at her back. Inside, the world was aglow with dawn's first touch. A shifting palette of gold, peach, and 1,000 subtle colors painting each familiar object. The lines of her single bed, the gentle curve of the windowsill with its chipped paint, the ancient wardrobe hunched in one corner, the beloved stuffed bear on the shelf, each was more vivid than she remembered. As if her absence from herself had at last ended, and she could truly see. The desk called to her from the shadows, and she found herself drawn to it. With careful hands, she opened the drawer, releasing a small cloud of dust that shimmered in the rising light. Out came her old notebook, crusted with age but still firm and intact. Its slender spine held thoughts she'd left incomplete, unfinished stories. As she flipped through its pages, ink blurred here and there where rain or tears had fallen. She was greeted by the voice of her younger self, eager and uncertain, hopeful and quietly wounded. Fear no longer kept her from those half-written lines. She smiled, a little sadly, at the innocence that hid, shy and patient, between the lines, dreams interrupted by longing, by loss, by the confusion of growing up. But then, with a breath that seemed to come from somewhere far, far inside her, she picked up her pen. Her hand shook, not from doubt, but from the wild intimation of change. A new chapter was waiting, and she felt the keys of her heart click into place. She began to write, gentle lines, trembling yet bold. She questioned the thin line separating memory and presence, past and now. Was it her grandmother's face she'd seen in the night? Or was it only her own? The self she lost for a season to sorrow and regret? Had her tears been farewell or a greeting? Within her, a voice spoke quietly, telling her that it was enough to remember that carrying old sorrow was not honor, but a burden she could at last set down. She could love without clutching, recall without agony, walk forward without erasing what came before. Her words, written in dawn's new light, shimmered with acceptance. Carefully, she closed the notebook and laid it on the desk, as one might place a treasure where it would always be safe but no longer needed as armor. She turned toward the small window where slender areca palms drank the first morning sun. Light poured into the room, warm and golden, uplifting every corner and chasing away what shadows remained. A delicate, unstudied smile played at Lynn's lips. It was not radiant, not triumphant or wild, but it was true and tender. A private affirmation that belonged solely to her. I am here, she thought. I am back. The past has shaped me. The memories are threads that strengthen, not chains that bind. I am in this moment, in this home, body, mind, and soul. Above the roof, a little bird sang out full-throated, joyous and clear. The curtains rippled where the wind slipped in, gentle as a mother's hand. Dawn unfurled itself fully at last, every surface bathed in renewing light. Lynn stood quietly, breathing in the peace of it all, as if the world had been remade in her presence, and she had only now learned how to belong to herself once more. The night was gone. The new day was here, not perfect nor easy, but entirely her own. And in that rising brightness, Lynn walked forward. Her spirit lightened, her heart changed, awake at last.